Good evening, everyone, and welcome to our 2022 Immigration Forum. Before we begin, I'd like to ask Mr. Carty if he could just come up and say a word of prayer for us to open the program.
Let us all pray. Praise waits for thee, O God, in Zion, and unto thee shall vows be performed. O you who hear our prayers, and you shall all flesh come. And so we come to you this evening, Heavenly Father, to give you thanks and praise. Thank you for bringing us to this time and place. We ask that you open our hearts and our minds, that whatever we do is done to the honor and glory of your dear name's sake, trusting in your ever-loving care and mercies, that whatever we do is done to the honor for you. These and other mercies we ask in your dear name's sake, trusting in your ever-loving care and mercies. And together we all say, amen, amen, and amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Carty. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. On behalf of the West Indian Social Club of Hartford, the chair and the board of directors, I'd like to welcome you to our 2022 Immigration Forum. We're happy to have you as our honored guest, and we hope that you will find this program helpful and informative. Before we begin, however, I'd like to set a few ground rules, especially for those who are in Zoom land. Please remember to mute your microphones if you're not speaking. If you have a question, we ask that you either write them on the chat box or raise your hands and we'll recognize you. I hope in-house people, we have papers on your table. If you have questions for the attorneys, please write those down and we'll get them to the attorneys in a timely manner. Anicia will be helping with the Zoom questions, and she'll fill them out and then pass them on to the attorneys and then back to me. And so before we get into today's program, I'd like to give you a brief history of the West Indian Social Club. The West Indian Social Club of Hartford was established in 1950 by a group of migrant workers who met on the weekends to socialize and engage in friendly conversations. 72 years later, the West Indian Social Club of Hartford is the largest and one of the oldest social organizations of its kind in North America. The club provides educational, cultural, and social support to individuals in the West Indian community and in the greater Hartford regions and beyond. Please join us on April 23rd, Saturday, April 23rd, as we celebrate our 72nd anniversary right here in the ballroom at the club. We look forward to seeing all of you. And now, ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, I would like to introduce you to our first guest speaker of this evening. Our first guest attorney speaker is DeVaughn Ward. Attorney DeVaughn Ward practice focuses on criminal and civil litigation, and he has represented clients in the areas of criminal defense, personal injury, real estate law, and transactional matters. Drawing on nearly a decade of experience in law and public policy, Attorney Ward has represented clients in both state and federal courts in Connecticut. Attorney Ward has successfully advocated for and represented prisoners in Connecticut. He serves as board member in several Greater Hartford nonprofit organizations. He attended Howard University, where he obtained his Bachelor's of Science, and the University of Connecticut School of Law, where he obtained the JD, a Juris Doctorate, and a certificate in public policy. Attorney Ward is a member of the Connecticut Bar Association, recipient of the Real Property Prize Day Award. He's a member of the Bar Association, where he received an award for the Urban, State, and Local Government Prize Day. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Attorney DeVaughn Ward, our first guest speaker for the evening.
Thank you all. Really appreciate the opportunity to be here with the West Indian Social Club of Greater Hartford. I'm a kid who grew up in the north end of Hartford and Bloomfield, and so very familiar with the strong tradition and history behind the West Indian Social Club and the great philanthropic efforts and community efforts that the social club brings to the greater Hartford community. Really honored to be here with you all this afternoon. I'm speaking to you all from the island of Hawaii, where I currently am working on behalf of the Marijuana Policy Project. And the Marijuana Policy Project is a national nonprofit that's based in Washington, D.C. But Marijuana Policy Project's been involved in most of the cannabis reform legislation around the country since 1995. They've played a leading role in 11 of the 19 legalized states in the country, a number of the 37 medical states in the country. And right now I'm currently out here in Hawaii working on legalization here. And so really excited to talk to you all about this legislation, but do want to say at the onset of this that I am not taking any clients for private entrepreneur or business endeavors. This information that I'm providing to you all is not legal advice. And that if you are interested in getting involved in the cannabis industry, strongly advise you to contact a business attorney here in the state of Connecticut that can best advise you on how to move forward. But I'm going to cover a lot of information very quickly. I do apologize that I double booked my schedule, not recognizing the time difference that I be on, and so I do have to leave. Won't be able to stay for the entire panel, but hope to get through a lot of this information pretty quickly. So I'm going to start. And first, I'm going to cover the law, which is the legalization bill that Governor Lamont passed back in June of 2021. That bill starting on July 1 allowed adults 21 and over to possess up to 1.5 ounces of cannabis on their person and up to 5 ounces of cannabis at their home in a locked trunk or secure location. Connecticut has had medical cannabis since about 2012. And so this program now allowing adults is really an extension of that recognition in the state of Connecticut that cannabis is medicine. And so starting July 1st, as I mentioned, adults over the age of 21 are allowed to possess 1.5 ounces on their person, up to 5 ounces at their home. And then legal sales are set to begin sometime later this year. And along with that goes a host of business opportunities, which I'm certainly happy to go over. I'm going to share my screen if I can. One second. Okay, here we go. I'm having a little trouble here. Well, so I apologize. Having a little bit of trouble, technical difficulty, but they do have the spelling there with the secretary. But I'll just talk through this in the interest of time. So essentially, what the bill allows is there are supposed to be 50% of each of the licenses are supposed to go to equity, what are deemed as equity applicants. And additionally, as part of this bill too, certain cannabis convictions that occurred prior to January 1st, 2000 and October 1st, 2015 will be automatically erased. And so, and that's without any petition or anything. Oh, great. Thank you all. I'm actually on page 7 of the slide, if you all would mind scrolling there. Perfect. And so, yep, just covering right now, we already talked about the possession limits. Retail sales are going to begin sometime at the end of this year. I just went over the cannabis-related convictions. And then I briefly talked about the equity provision, which requires that at least 50% of the licenses or half of the licenses go to social equity applicants targeting communities that have been most negatively impacted by the war on drugs, right? And now I'm on page 8. The law also allows a large portion of the revenue, which is expected to reach around 40 million once the market gets mature, to those same communities for economic development. So, you know, from a policy standpoint, there's a lot to this bill. There's the personal possession limit. There's the expungement of prior convictions. There's the market opportunities. And then there's the revenue that towns like Hartford and Bloomfield and East Hartford are going to see the portion of this revenue redirected back into their communities. The law also establishes a workforce development plan, a business accelerator program, several ways for folks who are interested in entering into this market, into this business opportunity to do so. The law also has, and I'm not going to touch on it, but pretty expansive bill. It also covers safe driving, preventing underage use, advertising, product safety. It does cover the obligations and rights of municipalities and zoning. It covers employment. The medical marijuana program prohibits cannabis at the use of state parks as well. So not going to go through all that in the interest of time. But yeah. So if you all will scroll with me to page 12, I want to really hone in on what a social equity applicant is. And a social equity applicant for a cannabis license is where the applicant, so the business, is at least 65% owned and controlled by an individual or individuals, or an applicant as an individual who meets the following criteria. First, that their income must have been under 300,000 of the state median over the past 3 years before application. So we're in the year 2022. So that means in the years 2021, 20, and 2019, you can't have made over $200,000. That's roughly about what the 300% of state median is about 200,000. So first of all, you have to have made under 200,000 for the 3 preceding years, and they must have been a resident of a disproportionately impacted area for at least the first 5 of the first 10 years before they apply for a license, or 9 years before they turn the age of 18. So let me say that again. Basically, essentially, to be an equity applicant, you have to have lived in a disproportionately impacted area for 5 of the last 10 years, or have grown up in a disproportionately impacted area, having lived in one of those areas 9 of your first 18 years of life, right? And so the question is, what is a disproportionately impacted area? And it's a U.S. Census tract in the state, as determined by the Social Equity Council, that has a historical conviction rate of drug-related offenses higher than 1/10, and an unemployment rate greater than 10%. And so that is what you need to be a social equity applicant. There's also these things called equity joint ventures, which I'll talk about in a little bit. But those are business entities that are owned by someone who's a social equity applicant and an existing cannabis business. So that's also a separate way to obtain your licensure. I do want to share the map, or maybe I can't share the map, but I will talk about the cities that are considered disproportionately impacted areas under this bill, and I'll put the link in this chat. It's an interactive map on the state's website that folks can go to, and actually you can type in your address and figure out whether your community is in this map or on this map. But I'll just list off the towns that make up Connecticut's disproportionately impacted area, particularly just in the greater Hartford community. So within those disproportionately impacted areas, that includes almost all of the city of Hartford, with the exception of the West End, Parts of Manchester, looks like almost yep. Okay. Thank you guys. Perfect. There we go. So yep, you got, almost the northern part of Bloomfield, the Hartford, Manchester, parts of Tolland are in there, Enfield, Torrington, Bristol, Waterbury, Meriden, New Haven, Bridgeport, New London. I think Norwich is in there as well. So you can see it's really, the major cities in Connecticut that this bill is looking at in terms of folks who would qualify as equity applicant. And remember, I said you have to have resided in one of these towns and these neighborhoods specifically 5 of the past 10 years or 9 of your first 18 years of life, right? To qualify as an equity applicant under this bill. And so if you do qualify as an equity applicant, you get a couple of different market advantages. Second. One second. Okay. You get 50% off from your fee, which is one opportunity, but you'll also get to get first priority in a licensing, in the licensing lottery. And so essentially all these licenses will be done via, there's 2 essentially ways to get licensed. There's one, which is the lottery, and the other way is those things called the equity joint ventures, which I talked about, where if you can partner with an existing medical operator and create one of these equity joint ventures, a 50-50 venture with an existing medical operator, you're allowed to pay a fee essentially and be licensed. And so the other way is to apply through the lottery. And so the lottery period, the lottery actually, I'm sorry, has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different license types, ranging from micro cultivator, delivery license, hybrid retailer, food and beverage manufacturer, product manufacturer, product packager, and transporter are the licenses available. And I'll let you also know how many are in each category. So in each category, for the retailer, there's 6 equity licenses. So that's specifically for those equity applicants that I talked to you about. There's 6 general license retail licenses available, which means anybody can apply to the lottery for those. There's 2 general licenses for micro cultivator, 2 social equity licenses for micro cultivator, 5 delivery licenses available for general lottery, 5 social equity licenses for delivery service as well, 2 general license lotteries for hybrid retailer, which is essentially a medical and adult use retailer, 2 equity licenses available for hybrid retailer as well, 5 and 5 for the food and beverage, 5 and 5 for product packager, 3 and 3 for product manufacturer, and 2 and 2 for transporter. And so those are the number of licenses that are available this opening round. And then the license, I'm going to move on to the application timeline slide, if you all could pull that up. So starting on February 3rd, the application window to apply for these licenses has opened. Each license round is open for 90 days. So it's a 90-day period. So it's not, just one day and you can get your application. It's a 90-day window. And so there's no real advantage to submitting it on the first day or the last day. They only will start reviewing applications after the deadline. The first application that was made available was the retail application that opened on February 3rd. The micro cultivator license lottery opened on February 10th. The delivery service lottery opened on February 17th. The hybrid retailer lottery opened on February 24th. The food and beverage lottery opened on March 3rd. The product manufacturer lottery opened on March 10th. the product. There we go. Perfect. Thank you. And you can see when these license types each became open. And then at the bottom it has when the lottery round closes. So the cultivation lottery round closes May 11th, delivery May 18th, hybrid retailer May 25th, and so on and so forth. And so you can see kind of right there. So after the transporter lottery, I think is June 22nd. That's when that one ends. Then after that, they'll host the lottery. It'll be done by a machine, almost like they do with the lottery balls that you might watch on TV. And they'll select, the first 5 applicants. The lottery process, I did want to talk about a little bit. Give me 1 second. All right. And so I guess I'll talk about the fees. The fees to enter the lottery are relatively low, but still, in the 3-figure range. So to apply to enter the lottery for a retailer, which is a dispensary, to enter the lottery, it's a $250 fee. For a cultivator, it's somebody who grows, is a $500 fee. Micro cultivator, which is a smaller grow, is a $125 fee. Product manufacturer, which is someone who packages the product, whether it's flower or an edible or a vape pen. The fee to enter the lottery is $375. Food and beverage manufacturer, so that's somebody who's making a food and beverage product like an edible. That's $125 for that fee, and then the product packaging fee is a $250 fee to enter the lottery as well. The fees are double that if you're not an equity applicant. And so that's once you apply basically for the lottery, if you're selected, you'll be given an opportunity to submit what's called a provisional license. On the provisional license, you'll list all your financial backers, the folks that are financially supporting your business, all the owners. You'll submit your provisional license. You'll pay your fee if you're selected as a lottery winner, and then you have a year essentially to get the final zoning approval. Come up with your security plan, your workforce development plan, and then actually apply for your final license. So you'll have a year to do that. I do want to go to the residency verification document if we can. And so, again, this is kind of just an introduction to this. There's a lot of material to cover, but if you are interested in applying to the lottery, the first step in terms of the documents you're going to need, I just want to show you really quickly, is you're going to need a government issued photo ID, so your state driver's license or ID. You're going to need a social security card and your long form birth certificate. Thank you. Yep, your long form birth certificate. You'll also need for verification of your residency. So basically to show that you lived in one of these disproportionately impacted areas for 5 of the last 10 or 9 of your first 18. You can submit all these kind of documents to prove that: bank records that show your name, a residential property deed that includes your name, housing authority records that include the applicant's name or family name, a signed or notarized lease agreement that includes the applicant's name, school records. So, folks who are planning on qualifying as an equity applicant via the 9 of your first 18 years provision, you can go get your school records and show, hey, I went to a school in one of these disproportionately impacted areas for 9 of my first 18. Utility bills, insurance policies, dated notices or correspondence from a local or state entity, and that includes your family name. And so those are all the things that are on there. And then if you scroll down, you'll see the income verification. Remember I talked about that cap, 300% of the state median for 200,000. You can submit any of these documents to show that they're going to ask for your pay stubs for the past 3 years, your wage and tax statements, if you're on Social Security, proof of income, annuity statements, pension, retirement, distribution statements, unemployment benefits. But they want to really verify that you make under the median amount. that's required. And then, if you're applying as a social equity applicant, and as I mentioned, that business has to be at least 65% owned and controlled by an individual who qualifies as an equity applicant. You have to submit this documentation, organizational chart, list of owners, list of affiliates, resumes, and it's all included in the documents that I turned over to the secretary. And I'm sure if you all want to see copies of that, they'll be happy to provide them. But I know I covered a ton of ground just now. I've been speaking for roughly a half hour. Want to open it up for questions and an opportunity for some back and forth and to address anything that I didn't cover. And so I'll stop right there and I'll take a little bit of questions if folks are have any. Thank you.
Take before we get into the question and answers. And the first one is that I'd like to introduce you to a program that is being held at the Hartford Public Library. It's called the American Place, and this program is about immigration opportunities. So if you could just bear with me for a minute, let me just introduce you to this program. For those who are in-house, you have some brochures on your table that pretty much lines out what it is, and the information for the Hartford Public Library is on there. You can just read through, and I'll just give a synopsis of what's on that brochure. At the Hartford Public Library, there's a place called the American Place, or TAP, and this is a space that has been created for immigrants. The American Place, TAP, at Hartford Public Library offers a variety of free services and programs designed to welcome immigrants and support their successful transition into their new home, their new city home, Hartford. These services include, but they're not limited to, U.S. citizenship prep and application assistance, English for speakers of another language, green card renewal and citizenship application, career pathway initiative, which prepares newcomers and immigrants for gainful employment in the U.S. Work culture. TAP also helps with job and career initiatives. It partners with the American Job Center to help with resumes and assist clients to reach their job and career goals. It helps with transitioning professional persons, professional newcomers and immigrants to colleges and training for services. TAP is seeking volunteers to share their time and talent and become a cultural navigator or to serve as members. It's a 2-hour per week commitment for 3 months. So if you are interested, please call the Hartford Public Library, get in touch with them. You can contact them on their website. They have the information there, and their address is 500 Main Street, the second floor, Hartford, Connecticut, 06103. Their phone number is 860-695-6337. Thank you. And so before we get questions for Attorney Ward, we'll just like to introduce our next speaker, who is Attorney Romano. And Attorney Romano is from Bloomfield, Connecticut, and has had a long history with the law. He recalls spending a great deal of time of his youth in the back of police cars. And just note that he was not a scout looking for employment when he grows up. Amazingly, he attended law school and graduated from the University of Pennsylvania School of Law, and has since had a successful legal career. He worked with the Philadelphia Defender Association. He has been Assistant Attorney General for the Commonwealth of the Northern Mariana Islands, prosecuting major crimes. After island hopping in the Virgin Islands, he returned to Hartford, Connecticut. He became an early advocate for the legalization of the cannabis, and was sought out for speaking engagements regarding the history of cannabis prohibition and its racist origins. He now assists with cannabis startups for licensing and regulations in Connecticut. Attorney Romano, over the years, has had numerous cases and is achieve outstanding results for his clients. A lifetime member of the National Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers, lifetime member of the National Organization for Reform of Marijuana Laws, NORML, U.S. Virgin Island Bar Association, licensed to practice in Connecticut federal and state courts, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the U.S. Virgin Island Federal and Territorial, the Second Circuit Court of Appeals, and the U.S. Supreme Court. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please join me in welcoming Attorney Edwin Romano.
Thanks, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here today and also to share the opportunity to be here with DeVaughn Ward. So he and I have had the opportunity to present at different conferences and speak at different engagements with town councils to talk about legalization, the history of cannabis prohibition, and why we're here today. My presentation covers a lot of what DeVaughn covered also. I want to stress some of the points here. Hopefully everyone is here to try and get into this business because this is a rare opportunity. We have a narrow window within which to make some money from this. We don't know what the future brings. If we take a look at the past with the way Connecticut legalized medical cannabis, we can see they really limited the market. And I don't know why, because I'm a free market kind of guy myself, and I know many of my Jamaican friends are free market people too. You know, they say that you can give a Jamaican anything, they can sell it, okay? So I'm sure all of you are here to try and make that money that is out there. And we see this happening all over the country. A little bit, just a brief background. I didn't include this on my bio, but I have a very strong connection to Jamaica. I grew up here in Bloomfield, and most of my neighbors and friends were Jamaican. I loved going to Bloomfield High. I found it to be a privilege. And then when I went out from Bloomfield High, I realized that high school really wasn't the world. And so being a minority in Bloomfield High, all of a sudden I was in the majority. But that experience of being a minority, so to speak, even though you were in the majority, was a unique one. And I think it stayed with me and actually brought me to where I am today. I did a semester abroad at CAST, that is now UTEC in Kingston. I lived there for a semester. I worked in a women's health clinic in Kingston, and I also taught in Ambrook Lane. I go back to Jamaica as often as I can to bring cell phones, computers, books, anything that I can for my former students and help them out, because now they have their own kids and I taught them. And so I really love Jamaica. I tried to work down there. I worked for a law firm as well down there to experience that. And now I'm trying to help some entities in Jamaica get started in the cannabis business there. And I don't know if many of you know, but that's becoming a big business in Jamaica. It always was, but now it's becoming licensed for export, like licensed for export. So there's a lot of opportunities in Jamaica as well. So getting back to the talk, brief background about cannabis prohibition. So cannabis prohibition has very racist origins. There was a man who was the head of the Federal Bureau of Narcotics, and this all happened after prohibition of alcohol. The man's name was Harry Anslinger, and what he needed was to make sure he had job security, and so he used, and we saw this in our last administration, he used the fear of immigrants to get white folks riled up to go ahead and pass this law against cannabis. Now, cannabis was a medicine that was used for centuries without any type of regulation. He rebranded cannabis as marijuana. And that's what we all really know it as. We just recently started calling it cannabis. Cannabis is the scientific name for the plant. But it was Harry Anslinger that coined that term marijuana, and that's derived from a Mexican slang word that originally appeared in the song La Cucaracha, which was a political song, and it talked about some dissidents within Mexico smoking marijuana, and that was a slang term for cannabis. So what Harry Anslinger did was he preyed upon the fears of the white establishment because Mexicans were moving after the Mexican Revolution into the United States. And he was saying that these Mexicans are smoking this very dangerous cannabis. And so this was a way to really target an immigrant population because this was part of their culture. They were using cannabis, and to illegalize, to basically give law enforcement the opportunity to arrest and charge and convict Mexicans of possession of cannabis, well, marijuana now. Now, once you're convicted, you have certain rights that are taken away from you, such as the right to vote. And so this really was a tool for the white establishment to prevent people of color from being able to vote. And we can see that this is a pattern throughout United States history anyway. They also preyed upon jazz musicians, and jazz musicians were largely Black musicians, and they were using cannabis as well. So again, this was an opportunity to disenfranchise the Black community here in the United States. Harry Anslinger is known to speak the following words in front of Congress to try and get cannabis prohibition passed. The main reason to make cannabis illegal, marijuana illegal, is because the darkies look at white women, darkies look at white women twice and they step on a white man's shadow. Now, at one point in time, if a Black man looked at a white woman, that was enough for him to go ahead and get lynched. Black people were expected to stand at a comfortable distance behind white people, which was measured by their shadow itself. And so it was this type of language and it was this type of fear mongering that ultimately produced cannabis prohibition. So the targeting of minority groups, Blacks and Mexicans, ultimately resulted in an arrest rate 4 times as high as white folks for cannabis offenses. So what does that do to a community? Ultimately, you have someone who's arrested, they're removed from that household. Now that income earner is no longer there. That depresses the immediate family. It has an impact throughout communities. And then you see that it has the ultimate effect of impoverishing communities. And it was targeted. And this was a law that was designed to do this, and it was effective. Now, fast forward to medical cannabis. We get to medical cannabis, and who's really going into the market for medical cannabis? We've got white bankers, we've got investment bankers. The very people who were affected by cannabis prohibition are not getting into the market because of the millions of dollars it takes to get in. Now, the way Connecticut is enacting its legalization, it's really important to understand the opportunity here. The intention is not to give Black folks a leg up from white folks. It's these social equity applications are not based on race, okay? I want to stress the importance of understanding the social equity applications because these are the opportunities that many folks, if they're not the folks in this room and not the folks watching on Zoom, it's going to be perhaps someone who can get involved, who you can team up with, who you can form a business relationship with and have an opportunity to get into this. There are 2 restrictions here, or qualifications rather, that DeVaughn talked about that I'd like to talk about too. They should be up here. There's a residency requirement, and then there's an income requirement. DeVaughn talked about this. In the last 3 years, the household income has to be less than $200,000. So if you or someone else, if you can team up with someone else who has had an annual household income of less than $200,000, you've got past the first hurdle. Second hurdle is a residency requirement. DeVaughn talked about the economically impacted zones. So there's a residency requirement that the applicant reside in an economically impacted zone within the last 10 years for 5 of those years. So 5 years, last 10 years in an economically impacted zone, you will qualify as a social equity applicant. So you've got the income, you've got the residence, now you qualify. The other residence requirement that you can try and get in is under the age of 18, if you lived in an economically impacted zone for 9 of those 18 years, you will also qualify as under the residency requirement. So think about the folks that you know, and I'd like to, if we can, that's the definition over there, disproportionately impacted areas. DeVaughn talked about that. If you get a map, the next slide. Perfect. So this is not the whole state, but you can get an idea. It really are, they are more urban areas. We do see some rural areas there in there where we see Waterbury Bridge towards Stamford, Hartford, some of Bloomfield, Meriden. So take a look at this. This is on the website. If you go ahead and you Google economically impacted area, it will bring you to a link, and then you can press that link and you can take a look at the map and see if you reside in one of those areas or have resided. So for instance, Bloomfield, half of Bloomfield is an economically impacted area. The other half is not. So just because you're a Bloomfield resident doesn't mean that you would qualify. You have to have lived in the area that qualifies as an economically impacted zone. Now, what's really important about this is, as DeVaughn said, half of the licenses that are being offered right now are going to be exclusively for social equity applicants. Half of them. That is a huge number compared to what the total number is going to be. An insider has told me that there have been no social equity applications submitted to date with the Department of Consumer Protection. Okay, so hopefully folks here know someone or want to get involved and put in one of those applications. The way the lottery is going to work is social equity applications go, basically think of the lottery, okay, and a number, okay, and a number is going to be pulled out. And once that number is pulled out, that's you, okay? Now, what happens with the leftovers, okay? The leftovers go into the general lottery that's going to be available to everyone. So if you're a social equity applicant and you don't get in as a social equity applicant, you still have an opportunity to go in under the general lottery. So that money that you paid for that initial application fee will go toward the larger lottery. It's a really big benefit because you are saving 50% on the cost of the initial application itself, which is that lottery ticket. Now, the lottery ticket, if you will, the application, it is something that many folks can fill out on their own. Some folks they've come to me. I'm working with another firm who's established in California and in New York, who's been through this process many times, and we're doing these applications together. Find another attorney, whoever you're comfortable with, to help you with that, and they can help you with that initial application. Big point is the social equity applicant has to own 65% of the business. So you should be forming a limited liability company or some other organization if you intend on partnering with someone who is a social equity applicant and you may not be one. That agreement, that partnership agreement, requires 65% ownership for the social equity applicant. And you have to lay out that business organization for it to be approved as a social equity application. Now, assuming that you get that lottery, then there's you get what's called a provisional license. The provisional license means that you have to put together your business plan, submit it to the DCP. They approve it. Once it's approved, then you have your full license and you're ready to go and operate. Now, here's a little downside to this whole process. Because of the way the market has already been established, it takes a lot of capital to start up one of these businesses. And the numbers that I've been quoting people and other attorneys have been quoting others in terms of being able to actually start up a business, we're talking about perhaps $2 million, $3 million just for a sale. So just for a dispensary. So that is just having a business where you're receiving cannabis, it's packaged, and then selling it. You're talking about a $2 to $5 million investment. So it's clear that what's going to happen is those people who get those licenses are going to have to team up with others who have the means. It's this conflict really in the purpose of a social equity applicant, because you have presumably someone who, they have to have low income, right? So they can't earn more than $200,000 in the past 3 years. So how are they supposed to have the capital to really put the business together? So one of the things that you should be thinking about if you're consulting with an attorney or someone else to help you along that process is someone who can link you with those people who do have that money. It's really important. And it's important that you put together an agreement that's going to be fair to you as the business owner ultimately. So the money lender should get their money for just lending the money. but you've got to keep that ownership for yourself and be protected. So moving forward, that business is going to be yours, and all you got to do is just pay off the note. I'd like to go over some of the types of licenses. I know DeVaughn went over this, but I'd like to kind of reiterate. If we can go to next slide, next one, maybe the second to last slide. Okay, so pardon me for a minute. Just trying to get on the. So, if I can, I'm having some difficulty pulling up the slide here. So, I wanted to get the dates. If there's a way that I could perhaps see the laptop. Can't. Okay. All right. Hold on a second. Tanya. Of course, your password is so sophisticated. So this is Tanya Dorman. I'm using her computer. She has a very sophisticated password. I could not crack it. He's yeah, if you could just go down. Yeah, right there. Yeah, that's perfect. Thanks. Okay. Thanks. I will make my PowerPoint available. I don't know how to do that, but I can make the PowerPoint available to everyone for review. The slides that I have, a lot of them you may be familiar because DeVaughn was using them as well. These can be found on the Department of Consumer Protection's website. If you Google DCP and Social Equity Commission, you will get these slides, okay, these pages, which outline the requirements to be in the social equity program. So the different types of licenses that are available are cultivator, which means you're growing cannabis, micro cultivator, which means you're growing under 5,000 square feet, retailer, which means you're selling the finished product, product manufacturing, which means you're working with the cultivator to finish the product. So manufacturing could be putting it into oils or putting them into pre-rolled cigarettes. There's food and beverage. So there is a market for people to consume within food or beverage, cannabis. And so, you know, we all know about brownies and that kind of thing. So if you are really good at baking, I know, I know that, you know, some of my favorite cakes are these rum cakes, you know, it just will get you. So get a rum cake with some cannabis, and that's a whole nother level you're talking about. Delivery and transport. So delivery and transport, this is going to be a really big business, I think, because there will be people who will need or will want, the end user isn't going to want to get up out of their house and go ahead and have to go someplace to get the cannabis. So they might work with a retailer, and the retailer would then deliver it. Or the delivery might be between cultivators and manufacturers, or manufacturers and retailers. There's a product packaging. So it's important you could just get into product packaging. So you're working with a manufacturer, or you're working with a food and beverage person to get the product and put it into safe packaging. There are requirements that it's not going to be appealable to kids. There should be warnings on it, et cetera. And then the hybrid licenses. So I have on this, I created a chart, I created a chart with the fees for social equity, for non-social equity, and the deadlines coming up. So the deadlines coming up right now for applications for micro cultivator are May 11th, for retailers May 4th, for product manufacturing is June 8th, for food and beverage is June 1st, for delivery and transport is June 22nd, for product packaging is June 15th, and for hybrid is May 25th. So I can help you out with that. You can call any other trusted attorney who is working within this field. They can help you with that. I know DeVaughn is doing great work as a lobbyist for the Marijuana Policy Project. You know, he said that he can't get involved. He's doing that policy work, which is great. So that's about everything that I have for you. I do want to once again encourage everyone to try and get into this business. We don't know when the next round of applications is going to occur. It was very rare and it was sparse with the way the market expanded with medical. And one of the concerns I personally have is that the medical lobby really does not want to allow others to come in. The medical lobby, all they have to do is pay $3 million and then they have an adult use license. That's it. That's all they had to pay. And to give you an idea of the scale of operations we're talking about, 2 or 3 years ago, one of the cultivators sold to a multi-state operator for $81 million. Okay, so they've got the money for this. So anyone who comes in now is going to really be trying to catch up with these other operators who are out there who have their market share already and have their branding and have people and have customers. So I don't want to dissuade anyone. I want to encourage people to do this. We're all here because we're interested in this. And if you personally are not interested, talk to others, get them involved, because there's a narrow window of opportunity here. And I hope that everyone who wants to get these licenses, again, no one's applied as far as I know, but we got to get in there and got to do it. So people who have been, who haven't had these opportunities can get in there, because it's all going to be big money. Okay. I'll take any questions if you have. No questions? Yes?
Do you have a hard copy of this slide for distribution?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Do you have a hard copy of this slide?
So the question is whether I have a hard copy of the slides. I can certainly make sure that they are available. I can, yes. Okay, so you can talk to Raquel. She'll make sure you have it. It can be emailed to you. Okay. Anything else? Yes.
So what's the process after? If say no one.
So the question is, because I made that representation that there are no social equity applicants thus far. That's the information that I have. So the question is, what will happen with those applications? You mean if they're not awarded to social equity applicants, then they go out to the general lottery, and that's what happens. I mean, we lose out. And so they just go to the general lottery. So people who are not social equity applicants, big businesses, folks who can really afford, folks who can afford to, start a McDonald's franchise are going to go ahead and do this because it's just fun. The folks who really don't need the money.
Right. So we also talk about the disadvantage that people have. Disadvantage. Also, have you heard anything, any reasons why people are not applying for this?
So I don't know. So the question is, I talked about the fact that people who are already disadvantaged as social equity applications because of the income requirements,
Right.
that they're already at a disadvantage to get into the business because of the amount of money that it would take to even start it up. And so the question was, why might they, if I have any information, why social equity applicants are not applying? I don't know. I know that I've spoken to several folks who would qualify, and I don't know if people are intimidated by the entire process, because like I said, it's an application that I think an ordinary person with some job experience and a high school diploma could probably get through, but there's some fine tuning there. You don't want to put in an application that is incomplete and then lose the money for the application, the initial application fee, and it being incomplete, and then you lose your opportunity. It's always better to hire someone who's on the hook if something goes wrong, and they're responsible for that. I think that would be a great way to deal with something. I mean, that's why, that's why lawyers are, we stick our necks out for everyone else. It's not our own business, but we're on the hook, and we want to make sure that things are done right for our clients.
All right, just so I'm clear, I heard this application fee. $500.
There are different fees for the different licenses.
Exactly how much money if you're the application fee, then you get hooked up with someone who has the resources. Is that their own cost out of pocket of 10% that they get concerned?
Right. So the question is, what are the estimated out-of-pocket expenses for an initial application? It really depends on if you're going to be doing it yourself, if you already know folks who you trust who might be able to loan you some money, because those disclosures have to be made within the application process. So it's hard to really pinpoint exactly how much money, depending on the type of license that you're talking about. And then if you're hiring someone to assist you, what their fee might be. I've heard of, I know of one group of folks who paid a consultant $60,000 to help them, just a flat fee to go ahead and help them with their application. That's kind of a standard type of fee that's out there, but there are lawyers obviously who will do it on an hourly basis. Just talk to whoever you trust and work out something that's advantageous or mutually advantageous. There are certain lawyers who will agree to take a percentage of the business should the application be awarded in lieu of some of the fees or their hourly fees. So there's all types of business arrangements that you can come up with. And I think everyone wants to help each other through this process, I'm hoping, and make some money and kind of get that money back in the community.
Hey, can I just know really quickly? I did want to mention that as part of the legislation, there's $50 million in bonding that is set aside specifically for startup capital and technical support for equity applicants. Because of the ambitious timeline in the legislation, they haven't really figured out the parameters on how they're going to provide the technical assistance and how they're going to roll out the startup capital. But that's a policy feature that's really unique to Connecticut, where Connecticut has essentially borrowed $50 million or planning to borrow $50 million to be able to make that available for startup capital for equity applicants. And so that money hasn't been released yet. But as we mentioned before, if you're able to come up with the money to get in your lottery fee and then apply for your provisional license, you'll have a year from provisional license until you need to submit your final, and hopefully that money will become available to you. But what to Aaron's point, what I'm telling everybody is, if you apply and if you are awarded one of these licenses, the money will find you, because there are a ton of businesses out there in other states, either legalized in medical states, that are looking to enter into Connecticut's marketplace. And so it's really important that folks apply. If they win the lottery, I don't think that finding capital or business support will be a problem if you are, in fact, one of the lottery winners. But I did want to talk about the $50 million in bonding that's going to be put aside to help with startup capital in terms of a revolving loan fund or low interest or no cost grants to equity cannabis businesses. That will become available at some point, I would imagine in the 2022-23 fiscal.
I had a question. So what's going to happen to all the people who are currently serving time in prison who were once distributing and doing business in the marijuana industry that was not previously regulated?
Okay, so let's before I talk about that, first of all, thanks for filling us in on that, DeVaughn. And like I want to echo DeVaughn's advice. Because we really don't know how that money is going to be distributed. It's always good on the front end to start establishing those relationships with folks who you will trust should you get that license? There was another question, Tanya, before I get to the question about what's happening in prison and a criminal justice aspect. The question is the investment of 1 to 3 million for startup. What is that based on, and do I have more details? So the 1 to 3 million is based on retail only. So that does not include what a cultivation facility might look like. Cultivation facilities require cooling, they require lighting, they require plumbing, build outs. You're talking about industrial sized buildings where there are going to be multiple plants that are going to be grown. And that's a lot of money for the cultivation. Just the retail alone could be that. And the reason I say that is the retail facilities are going to have specialized vaults to contain the product. It's not like a liquor store. We don't really hear about burglaries of liquor stores where people are stealing, beer. I guess when you're kids, you might do that. But cannabis, there's a lot more money there. And so the cannabis is stored in vaults, and there are sophisticated security systems and sophisticated point of sale systems to make sure that the cannabis that's coming in is tracked as it leaves. So there's no cannabis going out the back door. Okay. So that's why. And it's estimated on prior applications and what they may cost. I've worked on some, and those are the typical costs, even with personnel, et cetera. You've got to have specialized security there and the like. Now Tanya's question was, what happens to the people who are in jail serving time? So the way the law is structured is that there are certain crimes where people can get their records expunged. If you are someone who now has a conviction that falls within the ambit of legalization. So as DeVaughn talked about earlier, legalization now means 1.5 ounces on your person or 5 ounces total in your house or in your car, but it has to be stored in a trunk, in a locked container. So if you have been convicted of a cannabis offense that involves those amounts, then you can apply for expungements. I've been doing these for many clients who come in, unfortunately get arrested for other things. They come in, I see that they have these cannabis convictions, and I do everything I can to go ahead, file these motions to get their records erased for those. Now, you can also get your records erased for possession with intent to sell, because that falls within that 4 or 5 ounce that is now legal. Prior to this, over 4 ounces was presumed to be possession with intent to sell. So I've been filing these expungement motions or erasure motions to apply to people who have been convicted of between 4 and 5 ounces, but convicted of sale charges, not just possession. They've been successful with that. I know that there's one prosecutor's office that intends on fighting me on one of these cases, but rarely do they say yes to anything. So, but more to your point, there's a big issue that's occurring right now, which is what happens with the cannabis, the people who are charged with cannabis offenses while legalization was enacted. So what happens with them is they fall under the old law. And so I have several clients who are being prosecuted and they're facing jail time, where now, because of legalization, if they were arrested after July 1st of 2021, they would be facing Class B misdemeanors. Now they're facing the unclassified felonies and up to 15 years for their cases. And I'm still battling that with courts because the legislature did not make legalization retroactive. They did not make it apply to cases that were pending in the courts at the time. They only made it prospectively, which means at the time, at July 1, anyone arrested after July 1, that's how legalization applies. So, that's something that still has to be resolved in the courts, and I'm working on that right now as we speak. Yes.
Because it is not legal federally. What are the banking impacts?
Okay, so the question is, what are the banking impact of the business because cannabis is currently not legal federally? Right now, what people are doing is they're banking with local credit unions. And so local credit unions are working with cannabis businesses. There is a memo that came out within the Biden administration to kind of loosen things regarding cannabis. But until, you're right, until it is fully legal, it's going to be difficult. And you're going to have to be working with local banks for this. And that's why the money lending part of it is through private equity firms. You can't just go out and get a small business loan. You can't just go out and get a loan from a bank. You have to find private folks who are going to loan that money to you. I know that when I switched banks recently, my bank called me up and asked me what percentage of my business involved cannabis, because they wanted to know directly what my business was involved directly, because they didn't want to bank with me if I owned a cannabis business itself. So it still is a problem. But I want to thank you very much for the opportunity to speak to you today. You can contact me. If you go to the last slide, that's my contact information. Right here in Bloomfield, we've got a farm on Woodland. Come out. We've got events during the summer. We've got some really good bands coming. And yeah, it was a cannabis. I had to sue the Department of Agriculture 3 years ago to grow hemp. And I had a nice, huge hemp harvest 3 years ago, about 6 acres of hemp, a couple tons. And it was a fantastic time getting involved personally, cultivating cannabis for that season. And I hope that all of you really learn more about this. I hope you get involved, find someone who you trust, a lawyer who you trust to help you through this process. And I wish you all well. Yes. Oh, yes.
We have a couple of questions before I let you go.
Sure.
Yes. So Claudette Titus asked, how far extended Delaware parentheses are these policies?
Could you repeat the question?
How far extended
Delaware?
are these policies?
Not sure I understand the question. How far extended are the policies?
I think she might be referring to Delaware law on the issue of where Connecticut.
Oh, so I'm unfamiliar with what's going on in Delaware. But I would imagine,
I can speak to that.
Okay, great. DeVaughn.
You asked how different are Connecticut's policies than Delaware? Is that the question here?
Yes.
Okay. Delaware is actually in the process of adopting adult use cannabis. So Connecticut's policy right now is more progressive than Delaware. Delaware, they have a bill that's pending. It may or may not pass this session. It didn't pass. They need 2/3 of the legislature to sign off to get it through there. And so they're working there in Delaware, but and they have medical in Delaware, but they do not have adult use. So they do not allow cannabis possession or use by adults over the age of 21 like we do here in Connecticut. So Connecticut is a bit ahead of Delaware with respect to cannabis policy.
Okay, well, I'm told my time is up.
Sorry.
Okay. And I just want to say on my way in, I saw the Mandala band warming up. So I think they have a show tonight. So I'm going to be here later on tonight. I have to see all of you there if you have any questions. Okay, take care.
Thank you, Attorney Ward and Attorney Romano, for that wonderful presentation. It was very informative, and we have a lot of questions, but on the interest of time, we have to wrap up this section and move on to the next section. And so we move on to the next section where we have two more attorneys who will present the focus, just to remind everyone what the focus of today's forum is. As we continue, we focus on cannabis industry in the urban community, marijuana legalization laws, and the business operation of marijuana. We just wrapped up that section. So now we're moving on to adjustment of immigration status and overseas processing and humanitarian rights for immigrants. On that note, I'd like to introduce you to our next speaker, who is, and I hope I'm not messing her name up, she reminded me about Ellen Messali. that works, thank you. Her pronouns are she, her, and hers. She's an immigrant staff attorney at New Haven Legal Assistance Association, NHLAA. She represents detained immigrants, both in bond and removal hearings, focusing on humanitarian relief, such as asylum, U visas, petition under the Violence Against Women Act. Prior to working at UHLAA, New Haven Legal Assistance Association, she worked as staff attorney for the Survivor Services Program at the CT Institute for Refugees and Immigrants at the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants. Attorney Messali holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Legal Studies and Political Science from Rogers University in Rhode Island. In 2007, she graduated with summa cum laude. She's a Juris Doctor and humanitarian rights. She holds a Juris Doctor degree and humanitarian rights certificate from the University of Connecticut. She's an avid tap dancer, a runner, and a relatively newlywed. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me in welcoming Attorney Ellen Messali.
Thank you so much for having me here today. I really appreciate it. It was great to see Attorney Ward. He and I went to law school together and graduated in the same year. Oh, sorry. Better? Right in front of the mic. Okay. He and I went to law school together and graduated, and it's so cool seeing my colleagues doing the awesome things that they're doing, like Attorney Ward. So I am here today just to sort of give an introduction, and actually, here we go. Hear me? Sorry. To give an introduction to something that I'm really privileged to be a part of, called the Connecticut Coalition for Immigrant Freedom. I don't know if we have the slides coming up. I can wait real quick while we do that. Excellent. And that's actually perfect. That should be the right slide. Yes, thank you. So as they said, I'm an immigration attorney at New Haven Legal Assistance Association. And so what does that have to do with Hartford? Recently, New Haven Legal Assistance, which we just call LAA to make it easier to say, and my colleagues at IRIS, Integrated Refugee and Immigrant Services, formed a coalition several years ago that we call the Connecticut Coalition for Immigrant Freedom, because we share this desire to really radically transform immigration representation throughout the country, but definitely in the part that we can have something to do with, which is right here in Connecticut. I think a lot of people don't know a lot about our immigration removal system and the fact that people who are facing removal from the United States are not given legal representation. In criminal courts, we have public defenders. What we are hoping to do is sort of establish that for our immigration courts, where people desperately need representation, but there's no access to counsel program for people who can't afford to hire an attorney. And so that's what we're trying to do. Independently, we are two separate nonprofits that are now collaborating together. New Haven Legal Assistance is one of the many legal assistance organizations throughout Connecticut. And you can kind of think of us as like the civil public defender's office. I work in immigration, but I have colleagues that do housing and family law and benefits law. And so that's what New Haven Legal Assistance is about. And IRIS is a wonderful organization for us to partner with, because they bring sort of the social services aspect that we don't have, which I'd really love to see us have at Legal Assistance, into this partnership so that we can try to make representation in immigration court more holistic, because people come to us with much more than just their legal needs. There are housing needs, there's getting kids enrolled in schools, there's access to employment and food safety and things like that. And so we really try to work together to offer the goal being universal representation, but to do as best as we can with the limited resources that we have to do that and to bring social services and advocacy into the mix as well. So if we can go to the next slide. Oh, thank you very much. So I wanted to just talk a little bit about who our clients are. So we sort of really saw the need for our program. It really sort of came to the forefront for us when the pandemic hit, and we had a lot of clients who were Connecticut residents and they were detained in Massachusetts and in other states with no representation at all and desperately needing to get out of where they were being held because the pandemic was raging, and those facilities are petri dishes for these kinds of viruses. So we really started ramping up doing bond hearings for individuals, and we do that statewide, regardless of whether the individual lived in Connecticut before. If you are being detained and you were a Connecticut resident, we offer representation, removal proceedings for people who are detained. If you're not eligible for bond or bond wasn't granted and you have to go through proceedings while you are detained, we offer representation there as well. Removal proceedings for people who are recently arrived, even if they're not detained, and we have been limiting sort of that to our area. However, thanks to a really generous grant from the Hartford City Council that sort of brought us into Hartford County to do this work as well, we have been able to offer representation for people in removal proceedings who have final hearings coming up within the next 6 months and still do not have representation. And thank goodness for that funding that Hartford gave us. In the last 10 months or so, we've been able to represent 15 different Hartford residents in their removal proceedings, some of those comprising families that are here in Hartford. And we really hope we're going to be able to continue that collaboration. Of course, we make exceptions when our capacity permits, outside of these areas, but because of the limited capacity and the incredible need, this is sort of who we have been prioritizing, just to give you a sense. And finally, I just wanted to put up our contact information. We have developed an email and phone number for the coalition, so that if you think you might be eligible for services or a family member is detained or facing removal proceedings and you think they may be eligible for our services, please call or send an email. For people who are outside of our eligibility, we still offer free consultations about you can tell us what your situation is. If you may be facing removal and you're just looking for advice, we do set up consultations and have access to, language services if the person is not a native English speaker. So just really hoping to do as much good as we can in as many places as we can throughout the state. So we're really grateful again to Hartford to letting us grow into this area and hope to continue that work and grow into other parts of the state. So if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer. If not, I just appreciate being able to talk a little bit about what we do. So.
I have a hearing.
Yes.
I have a hearing. I went to do the interview. After I've done the interview, they said my case is in review, and that's about a year now.
Mm-hmm.
What is the procedure after this to speed it up?
So it sounds like you went for an interview at U.S. citizenship in Hartford.
Yes, with an attorney.
With an attorney. Okay.
And I get back a message on my phone saying the interview is completed,
Mm-hmm.
but my case is in review.
Yeah.
So what's over here now? I haven't heard anything.
Yeah, that's such a sadly common thing I hear from so many people is the delay, the no information. I would certainly speak to your attorney about seeing whether they might be able to set up something called an info pass appointment. These used to be more accessible, where you used to sort of be able to go into Hartford and say, hey, what's going on with this file? Now there are a few hoops to jump through to get one of those appointments, but we've, the attorneys who do this work have figured out a couple tricks to get those set up still. I would definitely speak to whoever represented you there and say, can you call and set up an info pass appointment and see if you can get some information about why this is taking so long? I'd be happy to.
What's the term?
It's called info, like the first part of information, and then pass, PASS. And I'm sure they know they can call, they have to call this 1-800 number that Hartford or that US Citizenship and Immigration has for basically calling in on status questions and things like that. So you call that 1-800 number that I used to know by heart, but I'm sure they will know it. And they can hopefully set up an info pass appointment to get it. Yep, to get a little bit more information. There are some tools online too that they can access to say, my case is out of processing times. They can sometimes email the field office directors at Hartford. So, and sometimes we just need a little poking because we have, sometimes 80, 150 clients, and sometimes we're just not on top of those things. So poke a little bit and hopefully they'll be able to get you some information. Yeah, of course. So thank you again so much for having me. I'm here till the end, so please come up and say hi. Yes, Josh. Hi.
So I just wanted to sort of make a comment. I'm city councilman. You heard Ellen mention that. You heard Ellen mention that the city council gave some money to make this program come to the city.
Oh, yes, come up, please.
See, I'm wild about being a politician, but so it was a fight to get the money that we got to pay for this program to come and represent Hartford residents. And I just wanted to mention that because budget time for the city is coming up, right? We sort of start our budget hearings in April and we finish in May. So if you're a Hartford resident, I would urge you to speak to your council members, and that's me and 8 others. We don't have districts, at least for the time being. That means you could call any and all of us. I think 2 council members live in the North End, which is TJ Clark, who lives on Blue Hills, and Shirley Surgeon, who lives off Albany. Councilman Hercules, who was just appointed, lives in Silent Hill. I live right off Park Street. So I had a healthy bike ride here. But I would really urge you to urge your council members to approve this money, because if we can get this money again, there's a good chance we can also get a grant from a foundation that would double the money. No one else is doing this in Connecticut. There's no other city that is doing this, who's paying for representation for their residents to fight deportation. And so the more we do it, I think the more we can make the money grow and maybe be a model for the nation, and of course, help our neighbors to stay home. So I just wanted to add that, and I thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Attorney Messali. Thank you, Josh, for clarifying that and explaining to us how that came about. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to just ask you to hold off on your questions until we have our final presenter for the interest of time. Let me just dive into it and introduce our final presenter for the evening. Our final presenter is no stranger to us. In fact, she serves on the board of directors of the West Indian Social Club. Tanya Dorman is the principal of the Dorman Law Firm in Hartford, Connecticut. Her practice areas include, but is not limited to, immigration, naturalization law, deportation and removal, litigation, family law, and real estate. She works as assigned counsel with the state of Connecticut, defending the indigent in criminal proceedings. She provides pro bono legal services with statewide legal services to represent the indigent with civil litigation needs and immigration subject to persecution, cruelty, domestic violence, and child abuse. Attorney Dorman obtained her associate's and bachelor's of science degree from the University of Hartford and Hartford College for Women, respectively. She obtained her Juris Doctor from the University of Connecticut. Attorney Dorman is admitted to practice in Connecticut, United States District Court, and the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. She's a member of the Connecticut Bar Association, the American Bar Association, American Immigration Lawyers Association, Connecticut Trial Lawyers, CT Defense Lawyers Association, just to name a few. Attorney Dorman she served the West Indian Social Club of Hartford in various capacities over the years. She is currently Director of Compliance and Regulation Services. Ladies and gentlemen, without further ado, please welcome Attorney Tanya Dorman.
Thank you, Claudette. Thanks to everyone who's here tonight. Thanks to my colleagues who have presented earlier. Really appreciate the help of bringing information to the community. The West Indian Social Club is the only place you could come to a nice forum like this and talk about weed or ganja and immigration all in the same afternoon. So we're here to make sure we're covering all the community bases. Today, we're going to talk about one little area of immigration. As you could see, my colleague that was before me, she showed a list of immigration services that included like deportation, asylum services, green card, a variety of things. So as you can see, immigration covers a very wide gambit of benefits and services for people looking to live, work, play, and travel and visit, study, and do other things in this country. And for those people who the country does not want to be here. So today I'm going to talk about green cards, all right? So let's see, by a show of hands, people who think that their relatives in a foreign country can submit an application for adjustment of status and get a green card to live here. Who thinks that can happen? I see a couple of hands, yeah? Think that can happen? It cannot. So today I want to clear it up for everybody, okay? So we don't have people sending the wrong applications to the wrong places and forgetting to give the right applications to the appropriate places, okay? So first and foremost, anyone who's in the United States who's looking to apply for a green card, if you're here physically in the United States, you can submit an application for adjustment of status only if you're qualified to do so. And to be qualified to do so, on the second slide, well, maybe on my first slide, do we have my first slide up? Let's get that up. I'm gonna try to do this quickly enough because I'm on the back end of no time. So number 2 slide, please. All right, so there are a couple of ways people try to get green card to be in the country, right? You have the family-based, which I'll kind of dig into. Immediate relatives or preferred, we'll talk about those. Then we have employment-based, we have the special immigrants, and we have humanitarians and other kinds of opportunity to get green card. And then we have old law opportunities to get green cards, like registry and some Cuban adjustment type things that they're put in place by the government, all right? So the first thing that we have to understand about getting a green card by way of adjustment of status or even as a preference relative is that only immediate relatives can adjust status. When I say immediate relatives, I mean you have to be the spouse, parent, or child under 21 of a US citizen, all right? So a US citizen child cannot sponsor a parent unless they're 21 years old or older. We good on that? Good. So, and then you have unmarried children under 21 because the immigration law qualifies children as people under 21. So as long as you're under 21, your parent is a citizen, you're eligible to adjust status as an immediate relative. And also if you're over 21 and you're a US citizen, you could sponsor a parent. I think I covered that. Now, there are other people who are not able to adjust status, and those are the people falling into what's called the preference category. And back to my slide, please, third slide, page 3. Those are what's classified as relatives, all right? So if you have an unmarried son, you're a US citizen, you have an unmarried son who's older than 21, that person is in the first preference, as a son or daughter of a US citizen. So that's preference category number 1. Then you have the married children, the married sons and daughters, second preference. Brothers and sisters, third preference. Then you have married, and they qualify them into first, second, third, fourth preference categories, okay? And then you have relatives of lawful permanent residents who are in preference categories as well. So you have the spouse of a lawful permanent resident, unmarried child, 21, under 21, unmarried child over 21 of a green card holder. So the difference between these categories is that the immediate relatives are able to adjust status if they have an approved I-130, which would be the petition for alien relative, which has to be approved before you could get a green card. And the preference categories, they have to wait in line. So I'm sure you've heard about people, just waiting years and years and years outside of the country for a visa, opportunity to go to the embassy to get a green card. That is because they're in that preference category. Visa numbers are issued on a first come, first served basis. So they just have to wait in time. Because whenever you file a petition for alien relative, you get assigned a priority date, which usually is the date that the government receives the application. And that priority date is how they use to track it to tell you who they're processing or which applications they're approving and processing and getting ready to issue visas at the embassy. All right. We also have fiancé. So we know people who get outside of the country and they fall in love. I think there's a show on TV called 90 Day Fiancé. People know about that one? Yeah. So you could become engaged to someone to get married, and then you could file an immigration application for them to come to the United States. Then they have 90 days to get married. And those guys could file an application for adjustment of status as long as they're married within the 90 days and they fulfill all the requirements to do that. And also if they have children, those children of the fiancé or fiancée, they could follow as well with the non-immigrant visa to come and process an application for adjustment of status. You also have widows and widowers. So sometimes, especially COVID taught us a lot about people who got married and then somebody died before they had an opportunity to do the green card application or the petition for alien relative. You have people who are filing as widows and widowers, and then you have people overseas who are widows and widowers who are looking to come in. But immediate relatives who are here in the country could always file an application for adjustment of status if they're a widow or widower. And then you have the people who are victims of domestic violence. They could do a special petition as an abused spouse, and their children also would benefit from that. And they too can file an application for adjustment of status when their visa numbers become current, according to the count that the government uses to issue visa numbers for those categories. We also have people who are able to get green cards through employment. So employers are able to petition for immigrant workers. Most times they're able to come into the country by way of having the employer here do the employer-based I-140 petition for immigrant worker. And then they would come through the embassies with a green card. Unless you're in current immigration status here, you're not able to adjust status if you have an employer-based petition. There's some employer-based petitions that people could do by self-petition if you're an investor, if you own businesses. But other than that, you pretty much have to be current, meaning you have to be here on a valid visa. You cannot be someone who's overstayed, or what we West Indian people like to call run off. If you run off, you cannot adjust status based on an employer-based immigrant petition. And then you have folks who, who are special immigrants. So you have the churches, they could petition for religious workers. They too can adjust status if a visa number is current and they have a valid immigration status. So they're not overstaying or runoff kinds of applicants. And then you have the special juvenile immigrants. Those are the children who are abandoned. I'm sure you guys saw it in the news where a lot of kids were coming over at the border. They didn't know who their parents were. They couldn't find the parents. So those kids, a lot of them were able to apply for status as a special juvenile immigrant. Now, everything that I've discussed, and I know I'm talking fast because I'm watching my clock, but each category comes with its own eligibility criteria, its own immigration process, its own immigration form, its own immigration fee, and its own immigration processing time. So it's not as easy as just Googling up, a category and say, okay, maybe I could fit that and start putting papers together to send to immigration. You could get into a lot of trouble for that. The other thing that a lot of people get into trouble for is the marriage-based applications, because a lot of times people forget that one of the big burdens of proof that married people must show when they're doing a spouse-based petition is that they have a bona fide marriage. So a lot of times people are unable to prove that their marriage is bona fide. So immigration will say that, their marriage is fraudulent, it's fake. And so they committed a crime against the government by engaging in immigration fraud by marriage. It's a big problem because many people, even people with good, valid marriages, end up in that situation because they haven't gone through to make sure they're meeting the burdens of proof that's required for category. So I mention all that because everything you do at immigration, it carries a burden of proof like any other case. So when I have criminal cases and, they say somebody stole something at Macy's or burglarized someone's house and stole something, the state has the burden to show that that person did what they allege by, beyond a reasonable doubt, they're guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. In immigration, it's not that. They have a very, very low threshold to suspect and presume that you're engaging in some kind of fraud, and that they could use to deny you and put you in deportation. So it's a very, very important thing to make sure if you're going to get involved in a spouse base or any type of immigration application, fraud is one of the main things you're taking care of first and foremost. You don't want to have a fraud finding. So then we have humanitarian types. We have refugees. So I know there's a war in Ukraine at this time, and a lot of people are looking to come as asylees and refugees. Whenever people come and they're given a status as refugees, they can petition for their relatives to come. But those relatives, they can only come if they have an approved I-730 refugee or asylee refugee petition that is approved for them to come. So they too have to have that approved petition. They have to go through the processing at the embassy outside of the United States, wherever it may be designated, depending on what country you're coming from. So that's how those guys bring their relatives here, by an approved refugee petition. So earlier I talked about the preference categories, right? The preference categories are not processed by USCIS like the applications for adjustment of status. Remember I said people who are actually physically present in the United States can apply for adjustment of status if they have an approved I-130. I want to just add that the practitioners who do this, if you're here and you're an immediate relative, we can do the I-130 and the application for adjustment of status together. That will allow you to have a work permit, get a social, and you can continue to help your family while you're here waiting for your green card to be processed and for your interview and for you to get an approved green card here. The folks who are outside of the country, outside of the United States in a foreign country who are looking to come through as a preference category, those guys, their visas get processed first through the National Visa Center. I know people who do that for relatives will get like a little blue and white letter that says Portsmouth, New Hampshire, and it gives you like a number and you have to pay fees online and submit documents. That's for overseas processing. So when that happens, you have to file your petition first, then wait, then get a letter from the National Visa Center when your petition is approved that says we're going to process you now for overseas processing. And they give you a checklist of things to do, documents you have to file, fees you have to pay. And then after you do that, you have to wait again for that to be processed before they forward the applications to the embassies in the foreign countries to schedule interviews. So the interviews are never scheduled until one, the embassies are able to interview people, and two, all your documents have been submitted and your application is qualified to be scheduled for an interview at a US embassy. So I gave this little chart, little flow chart that talks about F1, F2, F2A, F3 and F4. Those are the preference categories that I described earlier. And anyone who falls into those categories, they can only get their green card in a foreign country. Of course, people are gonna come anyway. So here we have the scenarios of people who will come on a tourist visa and they're coming to visit, and whoa, lo and behold, they're in one of those categories. So now they have to figure out, oh, maybe I could just file my adjustment of status and not go back. Well, you can do that depending on the circumstances, but there's always a catch with immigration because they can deny you. Because when you come on a tourist visa, your promise is that you're coming to visit and leave. And then if you're not going to do that and you have that preconceived intent to, basically have a different intention than what you represented when you come in, then you could be deemed inadmissible because you lied when you came through the airport. And I don't know how these immigration officers are so talented, but boy, they must watch the show that says How to Catch a Liar because they nail people all the time. All right, next slide, please. Right. So this is what I described earlier about the family petition. It starts with the I-130 petition, and then you see we could do the concurrent filing with the green card if you're physically here, and the overseas processing, you have to wait in line until you can get interviewed at the embassy. Whereas in the United States, it's kind of like a faster processing time, and you have to physically go into an immigration field office to be interviewed. Now, I know that a lot of people who get married and they go through a marriage-based immigration interview, they walk out of there like looking like they're ready to choke, most of them, because it's kind of intense. They have what's called a Stokes interview, and I can give you a brief synopsis about the Stokes, but they got grilled at immigration and the whole interview system was named after them. This is where people go to an interview and they get sized up pretty much. They ask a lot of questions about relationships. Basically, they're fishing to see if the marriage is real or not. And this is another place where they nail people so quickly, sometimes you'll be amazed that they just know that the marriage is a fake. And if you happen to be in one of those categories of having a fake marriage, you could be on Fox News at 10 or the Hartford Current by the next publishing date. So you don't want to be there because you can be arrested. It comes with criminal penalties of up to 5 years in federal prison and $250,000 in fines if you're convicted and found guilty. So the exposure is very, very great. So I really try to discourage people. You have a good marriage, make sure you're presenting your evidence really well, because sometimes the good ones are the ones that die hardest, all right? The good marriages are the ones that have the fraud finding. And once there's a finding that your marriage is fraudulent, even if Jesus came from heaven and married you, you're not gonna get a green card. You're just not gonna get it, you're barred. So, that's why it's very important to make sure that fraud is something you avert by any means necessary, because it comes with very, 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 very serious consequences. All right, so I wanna talk quickly about admission to the United States for the people who are here. A lot of people will come across the border. They come through the Canadian border by way of a car trunk. They come over the Mexican border. They come, as a stowaway. They come in somebody else's name on a fake passport. You name it, people they figure ways out to come. But in order for you to adjust status here in the United States, you must enter with a valid visa or entry document. You must be inspected by an immigration officer at the airport or any of the border or ports, because if you don't have any proof of how you came in. And the current laws, they bar you from adjusting status if you don't have proper entry. So for some immediate relatives, you could overstay your visa, as a student, as a visitor, whatever category you get into. You're married to a US citizen and you're an immediate relative, you can adjust, even though you violated the terms and conditions of those visas. But any other way, you're just barred from coming and getting a green card here. And then the next thing is you could be placed in deportation because you have no means to adjust status, you have no means to get an immigration benefit, and you're deportable for coming here without inspection. All right. So you want to make sure you're here, you're physically present, you don't leave, because there's some people who they leave, they backdate the passport, they do all kinds of stuff, and then they come back trying to adjust status, and it just won't work because the law does not afford you to get an immigration benefit if you're violating the immigration laws, okay? The final slide that I want to talk about are bars to getting green card. So we already talked about committing fraud. We already talked about coming over without inspection or having a valid visa or travel document to come in. But everyone who's looking to get a green card is subject to what's called rules of admissibility. That are rules that are applying to you because you're looking to come into the country with some status as a green card holder. We have health-related grounds of exclusion, and this has been in the works with immigration forever. Back in the day, if you had somebody who had autism or some type of disability, they wouldn't allow you to get a green card. They wouldn't allow you to get a visa to come through the embassy. Now things are changing a little bit, but we still have health grounds exclusions. We have criminal-related grounds. And guess what will get you inadmissible from an immigration benefit like a green card? Anybody want to take a guess? Take a guess. Tell me. I want to hear. Who want to take a stab? Possession of marijuana. The very thing we're hearing about legalization and money, all that good stuff. Well, if the only time that you'll be able to get a waiver, like a little get out of jail free card with immigration, is if you have less than 30 grams of marijuana for possession of that. Whether or not you're convicted, you could still be inadmissible because drug addicts are inadmissible. And if you somehow disclose that you smoke weed 3 times a day and you need it to sleep, whatever, and it's prescribed, you're going to be classified as a drug addict by immigration. It's just one of those things. And if you're caught with trafficking it, Aaron was talking about transportation. No, not for immigration. Even if Connecticut gives you a license to transport marijuana and marijuana-based products, if you don't have a green card, I would strongly suggest you do not get into that industry because you're not going to be able to get a green card, because immigration rules are federal rules and they're kind of held in a higher esteem than state rules. So no to the weed if you don't have your immigration stuff together. We're good on that? We also have security. So people who are terrorists and people who fund terrorism or sell guns illegally, to fund terror groups, guerrilla groups all over the world, those guys are also excluded. And if you're classified as a public charge, you're also going to be excluded. So one of the things we know is that if your spouse or parent is getting food stamps and cash, they may want to get off that before they try to do an immigration application for someone to get a benefit. So state benefits are a no-no, or federal benefits. Fake documents and fraud and unlawful entry documents like a fake passport, those things, they are excluded, you get excluded for having those things. There are waivers. When I say waivers, I mean an opportunity to seek forgiveness for the bad deeds, but the stakes are very high to get one of those. And usually, when it comes to green card, everything is issued as a matter of discretion. So you could pay your money, you could file everything, you could be, Saint anybody. They could just look at you and tell you no. And no means no. And if the answer is no, the next phase would be deportation, to be removed and ousted. So you want to make sure whatever you're doing, you're on track to get a yes answer. The other set of people who are not eligible for green card is people previously ordered, deported, or removed. I know some people, have a deportation order from 1985 or 1991. Well, you cannot adjust status or get a green card if you're previously deported, and especially if you're previously removed for crimes or drugs or anything like that. All right, so basically, in the interest of time and to afford a few minutes for questions, that would be all I have for today's presentation. Thank you so much for having me.
Thank you, Attorney Dorman. Do we have any questions in-house? We have one in the back. Attorney Dorman, can you like fill out the questions? We have one in the back. Oh, it's written.
Is this in short now? The question is, when you go for a marriage interview, is it true that immigration starts to watch you from the time that you enter the building? So let me see. So it's a federal building. It's secure. They do have federal marshals and security guards there. They do treat it like the airport, really. They have a metal detector. They have armed guards. They even have a federal police with a dog. I've seen him a couple of times. And there are cameras everywhere. So yeah, they do watch people, but if you're worried about being watched while you're in the federal building, then you're too late. Yes, ma'am.
I asked that question is that someone was turned down, but they did go for the interview. In the process, the wife went in first, came at a different time than the husband. And when they got into the area, waiting for it, one was sitting on one side and the other was, there was no affection, and that was, they felt that's what it was.
So, so I'll just repeat the comment that, somebody went for an interview and the husband was in the east and the wife was in the west, and there's no chemistry between the two, and it just looked a certain kind of way. And maybe the reason for that denial is that they probably didn't meet their burden of proof that their marriage was bona fide, meaning they're really not together. So sometimes, if you're going to immigration to represent that you're together, you might as well sit together, right? You have a question? You have an attorney in California? So thank you for the question, sir. So you're here 2 months and you want to do a adjustment of status based on being an alien of extraordinary ability. I just want to ask you something. What is your name, sir? Okay, and you're famous? You're on TV a lot? You're in the newspaper? You have a lot of accolades? Yeah. Okay. So, right. So because you have an attorney, we don't want to give you any advice that might be in conflict with your attorney's advice and recommendations. But, the alien of extraordinary ability, it requires a lot of things that you have to prove that you are such, kind of like a Justin Bieber type. I'm putting it there. So if you feel like you're as big as Justin Bieber, you might be good for that one in the running. All right. Any other questions?
Yes, there's a question on Zoom from Christopher Albu. He says, I'm a licensed Connecticut attorney who wants to get involved. I am located in the Hartford area. Who should I contact and how do I get certified to practice in federal immigration court? Is there training available?
Training available. So the question is, young lawyer wants to get their feet wet and they want to see how they could start. Maybe they could volunteer with your nonprofit?
Yeah, so sorry.
Come on in.
It's a good place for me to stand to answer this question. So first thing is, if you're a licensed Connecticut attorney, that's all you need to practice. Any state license is all you need to practice in immigration. You don't have to be licensed with any kind of federal bar or anything like that. Some of the nonprofits, like specifically the Connecticut Institute for Refugees and Immigrants, do a lot of trainings throughout the year, depending on what you're interested in. I know they focus a lot on asylum. So you may want to sort of touch base with them. I know they maintain a pro bono attorney network also, so that could be a good contact. You also, if you want to reach out to any of the people that facilitated, I know they have my contact information. I'd be happy to talk to you.
Yeah.
All right.
And of course, yeah, and I'm here, they have my contact. You could call the West Indian Social Club, the secretary, Raquel is here. And we can get you some direction as to where to go to get involved. There are a lot of places to volunteer to help immigrants here in Hartford, including Catholic charities as well. I know some of the lawyers, they have internship opportunities, so give us a call at the club. Okay.
We have another statement from Claudette.
Okay.
She says, a person being here for over 30 years, established business and US children, yet can't get legal immigration status.
Right. So a lot of times when you have someone who's been here for 30 years and they have US citizen children and they have a lot of equities here in the country, you kind of have to dig a little bit deeper into their background to find out, one, if they have previously submitted immigration applications and there's been a fraud finding that completely bars them from getting anything, or their criminal history creates an issue, or they just need to have a consultation with an attorney to find out if they're eligible. A lot of people are eligible, even for naturalization, and they don't know because they have the old green cards that expired back in 1982, and they think, oh my God, I don't have any green card, and they're eligible to be citizens. And there are a lot of people who have relatives who could sponsor and petition for them so they can adjust status as immediate relatives, but they just don't know. My suggestion is if you don't know anything about immigration and you, meaning your status, it's time to find an immigration lawyer or one of the nonprofit organizations if you're qualified for their services, and just talk to someone and ask.
Maureen B. What if you have a child living in another country who suffers from schizophrenia/epilepsy? Can the parent file for that adult child?
You can file for the adult child. There may be exclusions on the medical grounds, but there may also be a waiver to allow that child to get status. Remember, everything that happens is as a matter of discretion. So it's up to you if you can make the presentation to earn that discretion. And that's it? One more? It's 5 o'clock. Someone who does not have the proof of entry, is it because the entry documents were lost? Is it because the entry documents were lost, or is it because you don't have any? Unable to produce, meaning doesn't have any. So they either came in as a stowaway or on a fake passport or something. If you can establish that you came in as such on a fake passport, there is a waiver that's called an I-601 waiver for fraud at entry. So if you came in on a fake passport, you can do a waiver to ask for forgiveness for coming in with a fake passport. But then again, it's a high burden to get that waiver approved. They do approve them, but you kind of have to show that your US citizen qualifying relative will suffer extreme hardship if you don't get that green card. And so that's a very, very high burden to prove, but people have been able to successfully get waivers. So that would be a good opportunity to do that. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, Attorney Dorman. Ladies and gentlemen, please join me again in thanking all the panelists and attorneys who presented today. Attorney Ward, Attorney Romano, Attorney Messali, and Attorney Dorman. You guys did a wonderful job and you did your best to answer all the questions. There are many questions, but because of time, we have to cut it short. Ladies and gentlemen, on behalf of the West Indian Social Club, I would like to thank you again for joining us today for a 2022 Immigration Forum where we focused on deportation, green card, cannabis and marijuana law, asylum, and refugees. We hope you found this information valuable and that you will join us again for all the programs. Before we sign off, however, I'd like you to bear with me for a few more minutes as I tell you about some upcoming events that we'll be having at West Indian Social Club, WISCO. On Saturday, April 9th, we will have a Hartford Caribbean pop-up, which is in collaboration with Integrated Diaspora and the Jamaica Diaspora Northeast. Here we will have, it's Caribbean focused, it's not just Jamaica focused. So we will have information about TRN, real estate, land matters, birth certificate, passport, banking, small businesses, groceries, and hardware. On April 23rd, we will have our 72nd anniversary gala. Tickets are on sale, so you can contact Tanya, myself, or anyone else from the West Indian Social Club to get your tickets. And we hope to see all of you there with us as we celebrate our 72nd. We are pleased to announce that we have a partnership with the Wheeler Clinic, where we will be partnered with them to deal with mental health. It's a long-term partnership where we will focus on mental health and wellness. And so the goal here, I'll just wrap it up real quick. The goal is to educate our community on mental health and wellness. Mental health is a stigma in our community, but we want to take that stigma away. So if you know anyone who could benefit from information about mental health and wellness, please tell them to call us, call anyone, call the club, go on our website. The information is there. Again, ladies and gentlemen, the party's about to begin, so let me just cut it right here. Thanks again for joining us, and God bless you.